Hello and welcome Star Wars Unlimited fans. I'm Justin with Gamers Guild USA, and welcome to our next installment in the Meta Prep video series for your next Planetary Qualifier. In the last couple of weeks we talked about aggro and mid-range, but this week, everything Control. What makes Control tick, its strengths and weaknesses, as well as some of the top meta decks, and some spicy alternatives for you to beat the meta with. All of the deck lists that we'll be talking about today will be in the description below. Let's get to it. Alright, before we get to the deck list today, I want to kind of talk to you about what makes Control, what are some of its strengths and weaknesses, and why you should bring it to your next Planetary Qualifier. The biggest thing about Control, I believe, is that it has game-changing leaders. Leaders that, when you deploy them, have very big effects that can change the pace of the game. Kind of like how when we talked about aggro a few weeks ago, that they try to use their leaders to employ early effects, early damage, they deploy fast, things like that. These leaders come out and they're here to stay. They're here to win the game. They're here to make a big game-changing effect. They're here to be a problem once they're out. Gotten to my leader, now it's time for me to win with it. They have a more reactive game plan, whereas aggro and mid-range like to be more of the proactive, I'm the one creating the problems. Control is the one trying to answer all of those problems. I feel like to get your Control deck ready for a Planetary Qualifier, also have to do a lot of prep. Prep being, what answers do I need to have along the curve to stop my opponent from winning? So that I can get to my late game, I can play my 8 drops, my 9 drops, my 10 drops, things like that. The biggest aspect of Control beyond leaders, I believe, is their ability to close the game out. What are they doing at the top of the curve that once they've controlled the game, they are now finishing the game with? And of course, some of you already know some of these answers in the fact that we've had Avenger around for a long time. Avenger's a problem. Right? Once Avenger comes down, that's basically when the curve's over. Control says, I'm here to win. The greatest strength, I believe, of Control decks in Star Wars is that they are actually a lot easier to play than your aggro and mid-range counterparts, because you're really only playing one big effect per turn. Really only have to make one big decision per turn, maybe one decision between turns, things like that. They're very straightforward to play. The biggest weakness, of course, is if you don't have the right card at the right time to deal with the problem that's in front of you. More times that happens in the game, more and more that game's gonna fall out of reach of you winning that game. And really, I would say that's the biggest downside of Control, and really the only thing you have to worry about. That's why you've got to do your prep to make sure you have the right answers in your deck, but also sometimes it's down to RNG. All right, without blabbing on too much, let's get to the deck lists. This Qi'Ra Green list is brought to us by Wu, that's W followed by 5 O's. Got a great YouTube channel, you should check him out. He's got great content specifically for this list that he won at Gen Con with, and how to play it. I think there are a lot of heroes that you can be running in Control villainy right now, and Qi'Ra is at the top of the list. At least that's what's been showing up at the major tournaments. I feel Krennic is still good, Iden is kind of falling off, so I think Krennic and Qi'Ra is where I'd be looking for, but Qi'Ra is looking to be on top right now. What makes Qi'Ra so special? She has a good effect. She has a way to basically stabilize the board when she flips, the big game-breaking effect like I was talking about. And really, just the options for Control have gotten a lot better. Now the endgame isn't just Avenger, it's not just Devastator. Now we have Snoke. Snoke is a game-breaking effect that a lot of blue decks are now employing. Why? When you play Snoke, the game just ends for a lot of decks now. Their units don't have enough power to stay in play, and the units that they would play don't deal enough damage to finish the game. I also think that Long Pike is a huge addition. The fact that they can play it as an extra resource and have a nice unit later, it's just a 4-resource 4/6. It is a beater. It can help take care of the mid-game. And going down the curve a little bit more, we also have the Client. An unanswered the Client against any deck that is playing units can spell doom because of how big the effect is. The other good thing that Control decks have going for it now is that they have options at 7. They don't have to play just Darth Vader anymore. Now they can play Maul if they want to be a little bit more aggressive or take care of different threats. They also ramp. They go crazy. They try to skip the early turns if you let them, so that they can get to their late game faster, so that they can put their Avengers and Snokes and Relentless and Devastators all into play to finish the game. Alright, the second deck that we'll be talking about today is Green Palpatine. This is by Matt Ranks, who also played at Gen Con. And I think this is a wonderful Control deck that has really been pushed in Set 2. We saw some of Mono Green in Set 1, but I think it has gotten a little bit more powerful with set 2 because we have more sentinels in the mid game, so we can actually get to our late game. We have more options on 7, 8, 9, 10 if we want them, but really the set 1 options still get us there. It, like much of the control decks and a lot of the late game mid-range decks, are trying to ramp a bunch. This deck can do it a little bit faster because we have Command on top of Resupply and Super Laser Technician, so this deck can really get the ramp going if it wants to. That's why you'll see a lot more heavy drops in this Palpatine green deck. I think this deck is very well positioned in the meta right now because it has tools to defeat everything in the game. It can go fast with aggro if it wants to, with all of its strong early game units. It can go into the mid to late game against aggro because of its heal and sentinel options. And it can also go super late because it has ramp going into all of those big drops like Reinforcement Walker, Relentless, Devastator. Plus, it has what I would argue is the most game-breaking effect in the entire game, coming from a leader in Palpatine's flip turn, where he steals your opponent's biggest unit. It's a big game. It's crazy. If you've ever been on the other side of it, you know how powerful it can be. If you're looking for a deck in your next Planetary Qualifier that isn't too complicated to play, has game against everything, ramps hard, ramps heavy, I think Green Palpatine can be a list for you. The final deck, and possibly the spiciest deck that I want to talk to you about today, is Chewbacca, and Chewbacca Yellow specifically. Now, this was a list that was brought to Gen Con by Jeff Mitchell. It wasn't one of the top 16 decks. It didn't hit the finals, but it does showcase the fact that you can play endgame with more than just the standard fare. I think Chewbacca is one of those leaders that once he flips is also a huge problem. It is a game-breaking effect. The other reason why I think it's good and why it's going a little bit under the radar right now is the fact that it can play tech and DJ. I feel like any mid-range to control deck that can really get you to the end of the game with tech and DJ can kind of outshine other mid-range and control decks because of the same thing that Han Yellow was doing that we talked about in the last video. You stop your opponent from getting to their endgame. If you can do that while also playing to an endgame, it is going to be very hard for your opponent to win the game. I think that it also has a really, really good early game against aggro because with Chewbacca, everything has Sentinel. Your opponent's gonna have a really hard time chopping through your defenses. You just need to make sure that you're playing enough ground forces and enough space forces to stop your opponent on any given turn. It also has access to all the sweet, sweet blue stuff, all of the blue removal that we've been talking about in Takedown, Bell the Dragons, and Rival's Fall. It also has Luke, which is one of the best units in the game, paired with Han, and all of the other late game that you want to add. If you want to be more thematic with more Wookiees, you can do that. If you want to go more meta with things like Redemption, you can do that. But I think that Chewbacca is a nice off-meta choice if you're looking to bring something to the tournament that your opponent probably hasn't really play-tested against, doesn't really know what your options are, and maybe a way that you can kind of cheat the tech DJ combo win because they might not be expecting it from you because it's only on their mind from Han Yellow. And that's a wrap on Control. Tell us what deck you want to bring to your next Planetary Qualifier. What changes would you make to your Control decks down in the comments below? As well as telling us any new content you'd like to see from us in the Star Wars universe. And as always, if you need singles for your Control deck, please visit us at gamersguildaz.tcgplayerpro.com. If you need booster boxes, packs, or accessories for any of your Star Wars needs, please visit us at gamersguildaz.com. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you found the video helpful. And may the Force be with you going into your next Planetary Qualifier. I'll see you in the next one.